Corey?
Yeah.
Let's
Yes.
talk some story. Let's
do it.
So,
I want to talk about the story.
I want to talk about the story. We talked a little bit about that opening mission, week 1. When you encounter when you go into Callus's throne room and you have to escape and you encounter the Nightmare of Galran on your way. I find it interesting that Galran is still maybe he's like the Leviathan's nightmare at this point. Because we get some interesting dialogue in this week's Sever quest if you find the Callus robot in it, where he basically says that him and the Leviathan are one and the same, that they've essentially fused at this point. Callus's essence is in the Leviathan. The Leviathan is, as we know, a living vessel, and Callus has kind of found a way to fuse himself with it. That's distressing. At best, that's distressing. At worst, that's apocalyptic. Not
don't
great.
Like this.
No, don't like that. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, that Galran is kind of haunting parts of the parts of the Leviathan at this point, especially Callus's throne room. We do, of course, see him as the first boss in the duality dungeon. He's the first one that you fight there, clearly on Callus's mind still, and of course we end with Keitel. I think it's interesting that Destiny is this story. You know, we talked about it last year, where and we talked about it briefly a couple weeks ago, where we think of it as a game that on the surface it's bang bang pew pew aliens, but last year we really dug into things like racism, xenophobia, bigotry, sabotage, insubordination. There were a few other themes, of course, that poverty, refugees, and somehow this game about pew pew bang bang was telling those stories better than any other fiction that was currently out there in video games, at least. It was doing something that a lot of other video games are too afraid to touch on when they're real world games. And yet somehow a sci-fi epic that has me killing a giant worm god is also teaching me these things. And is talking about them. And the company behind them is taking real world stances on things. It's adding, a canonical LGBTQ romance to the game with two of its most popular and most revered characters in Osiris and Saint 14. This season, they've decided that they're going to Bungie's going to become like our personal therapist. They're going to become, our trauma counselors. And man, I really hate their uncanny ability to be timely with this. But, we saw it with Crow the first 2 weeks. Eventually Crow conquers his, and you actually see Uldren's spirit in the light, hanging out in the helm now. He's hanging out over there by the Crown of Sorrow. I'm sure that's not going to come back to bite us in the ass.
Nope, definitely not.
This week we met a character that we haven't met before. We've heard her mentioned in canon, and I don't believe we ever knew her name. We met Sarifa.
I love this.
We met Sarifa
so much.
If you have not played this week's Crown of Sorrow missions, I implore you to pause the podcast. Please go play that. Watch the cutscene, then come back, because we're about to full spoil this. We got another cutscene this week after completing the Sever mission. And what we're doing is we're aiding Commander Zavala this week, who is haunted by the memory of his wife.
Yeah.
As the cutscene goes, for those of you who don't remember, or maybe you never knew, Zavala was Saladin's protege. That is something that goes back to the early days of Destiny 1. That was some of the earliest lore we got on the Tower guys, on Saladin and on Zavala and Shaxx. Is that Shaxx and Zavala were both proteges of Zavala, or of Saladin at one point, and they all kind of went their own ways. Which is why I was so excited when we got Saladin trying to apologize to Zavala last year. And it was that much more impactful that, Savathun drives the wedge between them, but he still becomes the ambassador to Keitel and ultimately becomes her war counselor in the role that she wanted Zavala in a year ago. Albeit unwillingly, but he does it to save Crow's life. And, we see these decisions start to weigh on Crow over the course of this season, but finally coming to terms with, I was Uldren. Uldren did these things. I did not. I'm different than him, but we're also not so different at the same time. That kind of confronting our traumas is what can bring out the best of ourselves.
Right.
You know, not just for ourselves, but for other people. And I love that he addresses it by saying, you know, if the hunters will have me, I'd love to bring some organization to them. I didn't know Cade, but everything I know of him, basically, I'd like to replicate that. So, you know, further hinting that he will become the Hunter Vanguard at some point, thus ultimately, ironically, fulfilling the Vanguard dare.
Right.
Zavala's mission, though. You get down there and you see Zavala just crumpled. And it's the only time I've ever wanted to be like, can I give an NPC a hug?
Right.
Can I activate my emote and just like crouch down with Zavala and just hug him? Because I feel like that's what my Guardian would do. He wouldn't just stand there fucking silent.
Right.
Not even Ghost is saying anything, and that's just kind of alarming. Like, okay, guys, I know we had to trim the budget, but we didn't have to trim it that much. If there was ever a time for Ghost to speak, I feel like it's here. But I love that Eris is the one narrating the cutscene. You know, you see Zavala and Saladin, and Sarifa is a medic who comes to Fellwinter's Peak at one point, and you know is talking with Zavala. Her and Zavala hate each other at first, but they grow to love each other. And it's really powerful when it shows her bandaging one of his wounds, and as this happening, you see it glowing, and it kind of indicating there's a bond. Like the bond has been sealed between them. You know, he falls in love with her, and they ultimately leave. He basically runs away with her in the night. He tells Saladin he's leaving, and it's discussed in the lore piece from this week, which I can't access because of the APIs. But he leaves his Iron Lord's medallion behind. As a message
Powerful.
to Saladin. Yeah, it's very powerful. They come upon a convoy that's been ambushed, and there's a baby crying. And they raise the baby as their own, as their son.
Hakim.
And unfortunately, it's not to last. We get the impression that Hakim grew up. We don't know quite how old. I would say at least 15, 16, judging by how he looks in the cutscenes. And a Elixir raid happens again. And in that, Zavala goes out to protect his farm. We find out Zavala was a farmer.
Yeah.
Farmer Zavala. Can you imagine Zavala in some overalls with like a straw hat on? It's pretty great.
One of those, like the pitchforks and like a little straw.
Well, you know, back in my day down in the South.
Tobacco.
Yeah, he's like chewing tobacco or something.
Yeah.
Hakim decides, despite Zavala's orders not to come out there, goes out there and is killed.
Yeah.
And it destroys Sophia and Zavala. It absolutely destroys them completely. And they decide the grief is too much to bear. And they go their separate ways. Zavala goes back to the Iron Lords, and she goes back to a community of people. Eventually remarries, has a daughter. I'm sure that's going to come into play at some point.
Right.
She has a daughter. We know that. And then after she passes, Zavala goes to her and Hakim's graves all the time, regularly. He's held this with him. We have to assume for at least 700-800 years. He's carried this with him. And it has weighed on him so much. And we had some lore last year that talked about her, without giving her name, I believe. I want to research and find that piece of lore because I want to read it next week, when presumably this part of the story will reach its conclusion. But it kind of gives some introspection into why Zavala is the way that he is, ultimately, why he was so protective. We brought up how he reacts after Cade's murder by Uldren, and how when Ikora is furious and wants to storm the reef, and Zavala tells her, no, I will not lose you as well. Like, I will not lose my other friend. I will not lose one of the only other people that I actually can depend on and tell my secrets to. I will not lose you as well.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it from this light now, like, it almost, not that he was doing it, making it sound like this, but it almost sounds like selfish in a way where, like, he's experienced so much loss in his life that, like, he doesn't want to lose anyone else. And you look at that whole cutscene where Cade dies and she wants to storm the reef, and he says no. Like, it's almost selfish for him instead of protecting her in a way. So
Yeah, it's just this wild story that's going on, and it's it's just it's powerful. I don't know how else to say it. Like, it's one of the most powerful things they've ever done, because anyone who's ever lost someone that they love dearly, whether it be, a friend, a partner, a parent, you understand exactly what Zavala is going through at that time, especially if you, in any way, shape, or form, feel responsible. Liana, one of our community managers, shared a story on Twitter earlier today about when she was younger, about 20 years ago, I think is what she said. And a friend of hers was killed. Um, I don't know, killed by, I believe it was by a drunk driver. I don't know if maybe she was. Um, but she's carried that with her all this time and
mm-hmm.
just had to kind of get it out there. We saw it affecting Dylan, good old Damage. The man who was his best man at his wedding, who works at Bungie, has been in the hospital the last couple of weeks with a pretty life-threatening illness, pretty serious illness and ailment, and it's been weighing on him. I've shared before, I have my own struggles, with depression and, with people that I've lost. And I think the older you are, the more likely it is that you've experienced something that this may, and I don't say this lightly, that may trigger you. It may trigger a response in you. Like, I played that and I was like, wow, that may be enough destiny for me for the week when I played that on Tuesday afternoon. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go back and do any more story stuff this week, because that hit me so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very powerful that Eris is the one doing it, because Eris is probably the only character before Crow, obviously before Crow, to ever overcome the demons of her past and her own nightmares. We obviously help her through that with the Xenophage quest. And man, I don't think that really, like, trying to explain it and explain the rationale here really, like, does it justice. But I think it's very poignant that this comes 2 years into a global health emergency. Some of us are just now, getting back to society for the first time. Things aren't back to normal per se. But basically everybody is like, oh, well, it's over now. And no, a good chunk of us are like, no, it's really not, and, kind of dealing with the collective emotional trauma, I think, of the last couple of years is bringing out some pretty strong feelings too right now. So I guess I would just say, like, to anybody who maybe is struggling, when you play this awesome story, it's arguably the best cutscene they've ever done. We talk about things like the Saint, which was so important for Saint 14's character moving forward and for setting the story. It's been almost a year to the day since we got that as well. In fact, I would say it's been about a year to the day. Getting some of these Savathun cutscenes. We talk about, Saint and Mithrax fighting together. Like, those are all cool. This is game changing on a different level. On a level of, where is the story willing to go? What are they willing to say while you're going pew pew bang bang? What emotional beat are they going to put behind this? What message are they going to send you? And I really think what it is this week is, and this whole season is, you are not alone. Like, I really think that's the message that Bungie's trying to get across here. And I think that's kind of at the core of all their games, whether they've overtly said it or not. Whether it's the bond between Chief and Cortana, Keyes and Johnson, both Keyes and Johnson. And then to Destiny, with the loss of Cade, and, now with conquering traumas and nightmares and the things that keep us awake at night, so to speak, being forced to confront those things heads on. It really is like if Destiny was having group therapy in a lot of ways.
Right.
So I would encourage anybody who, feels like they have, some demons in their past, who have, thoughts to keep them awake at night, and I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this delicately, because I tend to talk about it a little bit cavalierly when it comes to my own life. I would encourage you to know a few things, that you are not alone. There are mental health resources that, keeping it in kind of the Destiny verse, there are mental health resources that Bungie has compiled. We talked about those a couple months ago. They are readily available on Bungie.net. And I would encourage you, like, it is not a weakness to seek therapy. It's not a weakness to seek help, to find a group that you can confide in, to find a therapist, to find a one-on-one therapist, to say, hey, I'm really struggling. I need some sort of medication to help me out here. There is no shame in any of that.
No, there's really
I
not.
felt a lot of shame for a long time.
Yeah,
And when I
I
finally decided to straighten my life out, so to speak, and finally take care of myself and take care of my own mental health, I noticed changes. And it's still, I mean, it's up and down. Like there, I have great days, I have great weeks. This is a good week right now. I will inevitably crater out at some point in the next few weeks. So I can't see my therapist for a while. So I will probably crater out before I gradually come back up. And it's just like just because you sought therapy or you sought help doesn't mean, and I think this is something that the game's trying to convey to you also, like, it doesn't mean that, oh, you're going to be 100% forever. It just means, okay, you conquered that. Now, what's the next mountain we have to conquer? What's the next thing we have to conquer? And it's okay if you find yourself fighting. Like, if you find yourself with an internal conflict, that is okay. That does not make you weak. You did not regress. You did not give up. It just means you need a little bit of help. You need an extra push along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, also, like, I mean, not that I'm, like, you know, a therapist or anything, but, like,
mm-hmm.
my DMs are open, I mean,
Yeah.
they're open. If you feel like you need a community, like, I'm here too, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how much help I can be, but I mean, I'm always willing to listen to our friends in our community and stuff. So, because I mean, like Josh said, we've all been through a lot, and Josh and I in particular have been through things too. It's yeah. So
Yeah. So I don't really know if there's anything else to say there.